The sun hung low in the sky over a busy cafe in the heart of downtown. Emma sat at a round table, sipping her coffee, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. Her best friend Jake sat across from her, his gaze fixed on a group of people laughing nearby. He was nervous, tapping his fingers on the table, glancing at his phone like it held all the answers he needed. "Look at you," she said with a playful smirk. Jake rolled his eyes, but a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "It's just a big meeting later," he replied. Emma chuckled, leaning back in her chair. "You overthink," but as she said it, she couldn't help but notice the collection of apps on his phone. An Instagram notification popped up, but it wasn't that caught her attention. It was the dull gray case, worn and tired looking, with stickers peeling off it like it had aged a decade. Jake, your phone looks older than you," she teased, exaggerating her tone. "Very funny," Jake said with a light scoff, picking up the phone to defend it. "Oh really?" She laughed, ignoring him as he tried to cover the screen with his hand. The two of them burst into laughter, the kind that draws looks from nearby tables. For a moment everything felt light, the worries of the world melting away in their shared amusement. But underneath the surface, Jake's anxiety simmered. He was preparing for a meeting that could change the course of his career. As they bantered, the laughter blended into a comfortable silence. Jake feigned indifference, but Emma knew him too well. Anxiety had a way of creeping into his demeanor, even when he tried to hide it. She reached out, placing her hand over his. "Hey, you've got this," she said, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts. "Just remember, it's not just a meeting." He nodded, appreciating her attempt to encourage him, but he was still lost in the maze of his thoughts, the weight of that meeting bearing down on him. He muttered, the words trailing off like the steam from their coffee cups. Emma squeezed his hand lightly. "Confidence isn't about what you have, it's about what you believe you can do." Jake smirked, trying to shake off the tension, and they got back to joking. He took a deep breath, letting her words settle into his mind. As they chatted, laughter bubbled freely, the air electric with playful jostling and warmth. But then something unexpected happened. Just as Emma was about to unleash another round of playful jabs about Jake's ancient phone, it buzzed violently on the table, the screen lighting up with a name that made the both of them freeze. Emma's laughter died in her throat. She exclaimed, leaning in closer as Jake's expression shifted from playful to shocked disbelief. With fingers shaking, Jake stared at the screen, the name glaring back at him. This can't be real," he whispered. Emma said, her face mirroring his shock but also filled with urgency. Jake took a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. This was not just any call, this was something monumental, the kind that could lead to the opportunities he had always dreamed of. "Okay, I'll answer," he said, his voice trembling just slightly but filled with hidden strength. He pressed the answer button and put the phone to his ear, his heart racing as he mumbled a greeting. "Mr. Walker." The voice was smooth and confident, but it held an edge that made Jake's palms sweat. Suddenly, Jake's earlier confidence came flooding back. Here he was on the phone with someone from the White House, not just any person, but someone who was inviting him into the realm of power, ideas, and influence. Yes, of course, I'd love to discuss it further." He stumbled over his words, trying to catch up with the reality of the moment. But while he spoke into the phone, Emma's eyes widened, her mouth gaping in disbelief as she watched him switch from nervous to composed in mere seconds. The conversation unfolded like a scene from a movie. Cassie spoke about arrangements, plans, and even set a date for the meeting. Each word echoed in Jake's mind, shifting his thoughts from apprehension to exhilaration. "Unbelievable," Emma whispered, her smile wide as she watched her friend light up. It was like the lame, old phone had transformed into a golden ticket. Once the call ended, Jake sat back in his chair, wide-eyed and breathless. "I can't believe it just happened," he said, grinning stupidly, a blend of shock and pride coursing through him. Emma reached across the table, grabbing his hands. "You just got invited to talk with the president, Jake." His smile grew even broader. "It means I really have a chance to make a difference." The weight of his earlier worries faded away, replaced by the euphoria of hope and newfound confidence. But as reality sank in, a strange tension unraveled within him. What if he froze during the real meeting? What if he wasn't good enough? His earlier fears bubbled back up, trying to clamp down on the excitement. Emma saw it all shift in his eyes, and she leaned forward again, penetrating through the fog of doubt. "You, Jake, are an incredible person. Believe in what you can do." He nodded slowly, her words lighting a fire inside him. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, and he was ready to seize it. In the days that followed, he immersed himself in preparation. Jake decorated the walls of his small apartment with reminders of his goals, quotes that ignited passion, and even success stories of people who had once stood where he was now. Emma became his rock during this time, helping him rehearse his speech, questioning him as if she were the president herself. Every day felt like a step on a ladder, high enough to overlook the doubts that had once held him down. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jake was a bundle of nerves wrapped in excitement. He wore his best suit, straightened his posture, and glanced in the mirror before heading out. "You've got this," he whispered, trying to convince himself through shaky breaths. As he entered the White House, a mix of awe and fear washed over him. The walls echoed with history, and he could practically sense the weight of decisions made within those walls. He met Cassie in the lobby, who led him through a maze of hallways until they reached the Oval Office. Jake's heart raced as he stepped inside, the room somehow both intimate and monumental. The president stood behind the desk, exuding a charisma that filled the space. "Mr. Walker," he said, extending a hand. When Jake shook it, he felt the connection surge like electricity. This was it. The meeting unfolded naturally, conversations weaving effortlessly from one topic to the next. The president challenged Jake, sparking discussions that pushed him to think deeper and beyond any boundaries he had previously set for himself. As the meeting wrapped up, the president leaned back, studying him with an approving gaze. "I believe you have a bright future ahead, Jake." Leaving that office, Jake felt a shift within himself. It was more than just a successful meeting, it was a rebirth of who he was and who he could become. That night he met Emma at their favorite cafe, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He shared every moment, every word exchanged, and finally he filled her in on the powerful connections he had made. Emma listened, pride sparkling in her eyes. "See, I told you it was going to be amazing." Jake smiled, finally understanding the depth of those words. His vision had turned from a timid flicker into a roaring fire. From then on, they continued to laugh, to challenge one another, sharing everything, building dreams, savoring the victory of that day. And it all began with laughter at a worn-out phone that, in just one moment, became a bridge to something monumental. Sometimes it takes a moment of levity, a simple friendship, and a snap judgment to spark an extraordinary journey, a journey that teaches you to unlock the doors you didn't even know were there. And for Jake and Emma, it was only the beginning. The coffee shop buzzed with the usual morning chatter, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirling in the air like a warm embrace. At a corner table, the light from the window cast a soft glow on Jake's phone, an old relic adorned with fading stickers that seemed to tell their own stories. Emma sat across from him, perfectly poised with her bright smile and bright eyes, but Jake felt an overwhelming urge to hide the phone, even as it sat in front of her like an embarrassing family photo. Emma gestured dramatically to the device, laughter bubbling up in her chest. He stammered, trying to defend the thing that had been a constant in his life. "It's just a phone, Emma," she teased, leaning closer with a playful grin. "And you expect important people to call you on that thing." They both erupted in laughter, the kind that draws the attention of others around them, and for a moment the world outside faded. But beneath the surface of their jokes and laughter, Jake's heart raced. He had a meeting coming up, a big one with key players who could change his life. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the weight of anticipation hanging heavily in the air. "You're lucky I'm here to keep you grounded. Who are you trying to impress?" She winked, her voice playful but somehow carrying an undercurrent of seriousness. Jake rolled his eyes, trying to brush off her comment. "Yeah, right," he replied, dismissing the thought. "The president wouldn't even look at my emails." His voice fell flat, revealing more of his own insecurities than he intended. Emma noticed the sadness tinting his words and softened. "You know, every great journey begins with a single step," she said, leaning closer, her voice steady and reassuring. "Trust me, this meeting could lead to something incredible." But before Jake could respond, his phone buzzed violently on the table, shaking as if it were alive. The screen lit up, and when he glanced down, his heart nearly stopped. The name staring back at him was more than surprising, it was electrifying. "Whoa," Emma gasped, her laughter evaporating instantaneously as she leaned in closer, eyes wide with disbelief. "No way," Jake whispered, doubts flooding his mind. He reached for the phone, and for the first time he noticed how every imperfection, every scratch and dent on the screen seemed to matter less. The weight of reality settled over him. Maybe he shouldn't answer. What would he say? Emma urged, her voice a curious mixture of awe and excitement. Taking a deep breath, Jake nervously swiped to answer, his heart thumping like a drum. His voice cracked slightly, revealing the storm of emotions churning inside him. "Mr. Walker," came the calm, collected voice on the other end. "This is Cassie from the White House." For a split second, time stood still. The cafe around him blurred, the laughter and chatter of other patrons fading into the background. His mind raced, thoughts colliding like a wave crashing onto rocks. This was real, this was happening. Yes, of course. Jake struggled to keep his composure, each word spilling out like a fragile proclamation. Emma's eyes sparkled, her mouth hanging open in sheer surprise. She barely breathed as she watched her friend's transformation from uncertain guy with an old phone to someone standing at the threshold of opportunity. As the conversation unfolded, Cassie provided details, setting a time and place for the meeting. Each piece of information felt like a puzzle sliding into place, and Jake's nerves began to melt away. He could sense the shift within himself, the echoes of anxiety turned into exclamations of hope, like a fire igniting in his chest. When he finally hung up, Jake sat frozen, the phone still clutched tightly in his hand. Emma's hands were gripping the edge of the table, her eyes bright with excitement. "You just talked to someone from the White House," he laughed, disbelief mingling with euphoria. Emma exclaimed, nearly bouncing in her seat. With every ounce of her energy, she encouraged him, guiding him through his thoughts, helping him sketch the ideas that had once felt so distant. They spent hours brainstorming and rehearsing, Emma taking on the role of the president, prompting him with questions, challenging his ideas. The days turned into a blur as the meeting approached, and Jake felt the pressure mount. Each moment was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety, doubt sometimes creeping in like an unwelcome visitor. What if he wasn't ready? What if he faltered under the weight of such a powerful figure? Emma remained a steady presence through the storm, her laughter grounding him, her confidence bolstering his own. "You've spent years working on this proposal, Jake. You believe in it. Now you just need to share that belief," she reminded him, her voice calm like a soothing balm. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before the mirror, straightening his tie and adjusting his jacket. But as he stared at his reflection, 1,000 doubts swirled in his mind. He muttered to himself, anxiety prickling at his skin. Emma's voice echoed in the back of his mind, her confidence lapping at his insecurities like waves crashing onto uncertain shores. He arrived at the White House, standing before its colossal structure, the weight of history pressing down on him. It felt surreal to be there, yet he pushed through the anxiety gnawing at his gut. The atmosphere was charged, each step resonating with possibility. Upon entering, he was escorted by Cassie through polished halls adorned with portraits of past leaders, the air thick with gravitas. They reached the Oval Office where the president awaited. As Jake stepped inside, he found himself bathed in an aura of seriousness mingled with inspiration. "Mr. Walker," the president greeted him with a firm handshake, looking directly into his eyes. "Thank you for having me," Jake replied, his heart pounding, the ground beneath him feeling both solid and shaky at once. They took their seats and the meeting commenced. What began as an exchange of pleasantries veered sharply into profound discussions about Jake's vision, his ideas crackling with energy as he spoke. For the first time, he felt his voice echoed back by someone who understood the importance of his words. The dialogue flowed like a well-rehearsed symphony, each chord striking a note of clarity. With every question, Jake felt the weight of his preparation bear fruit. Ideas fluttered in the air, binding them together, forging connections that transcended the confines of policymaking and touched human aspirations. As the discussion progressed, Jake found himself drawing from sources of inspiration, the very stories Emma had urged him to weave into his narrative. His passion lit the air, and for a moment he allowed himself to forget the nerves, to just feel the essence of why he had fought for this moment. "Your insights are impressive, Jake," the president remarked, leaning back in his chair with curiosity sparking in his gaze. "I believe we can align on this." His pulse quickened, and in that very moment Jake realized he wasn't just in a meeting. He was part of a larger story unfolding, one that could ripple out and change lives. The doubts that had once plagued him began to dissolve, replaced by a powerful, unwavering belief in his vision. The conversation wrapped up with a sense of purpose, ideas etched into the air like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Jake left the Oval Office with a heart full of hope, the weight of his insecurities lifting as he walked back through those grand corridors. When he emerged into the late afternoon sun, it felt like a new world awaited him, one where he was no longer a timid dreamer, but a man who dared to believe. Emma met him outside, her face beaming with anticipation. "So." He paused, words crashing over each other in a tidal wave of excitement and disbelief. "It went better than I could have imagined," he finally said, a smile breaking free. Emma laughed, high-fiving him as they walked away from the White House arm in arm. Together, they were not just friends, they were co-creators of dreams, laying the foundation for a future that felt more tangible than ever. What started with laughter over an outdated phone had unfurled into a journey of transformation. From that day forward, they walked ahead, not just chasing after opportunities, but shaping destinies with every step, every laugh, and every little triumph that began with two friends and a simple joke. The cafe buzzed with life, filled with morning chatter and the intoxicating aroma of fresh coffee. Emma sat at a small table, her laughter ringing out like music. Directly across from her, Jake was staring nervously at his phone, which sat on the table between them like an old, tired relic. The screen was cracked, adorned with peeling stickers that had lost their charm long ago. Emma teased, her eyes wide with mock disbelief. "Your phone is practically begging for retirement." Jake rolled his eyes, trying to muster a smile. "It works just fine," he protested, defensive yet unable to suppress a chuckle. She leaned closer, eyes sparkling. "Sure, if a caveman needed to call for help, you expect important people to reach you on this." Their laughter echoed around the bustling cafe, and for a moment everything felt light. But beneath this humor, a current of anxiety swept through Jake as he thought about the meeting looming ahead. It was a crucial opportunity, one that could change the course of his career. Would they take him seriously with this outdated phone? Who knows, maybe someone important will call, Emma said, her eyes darting back to his phone, a glimmer of something mischievous in her gaze. Jake chuckled again, but deep down, the idea set off a chain reaction of worry. He shook his head vigorously. "Yeah, right," Emma fixed him with a meaningful look. "Dream bigger, Jake, you never know what can happen." But as they continued their playful banter, something unexpected occurred. Just as Emma was about to launch another round of jokes about Jake's antiquated phone, It shook violently on the table, the screen flashing to life. Jake's laughter evaporated instantly, replaced by a shock that felt like a slap to the face. He gasped, staring at the screen in disbelief. It was surreal. Surely this was a mistake. Emma's eyes widened, her playful demeanor fading into stunned awe. No, no way. With shaking hands, Jake picked up the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. Mister, the voice on the line was smooth and composed, yet somehow it carried an intensity that made Jake sit up straight. This is Cassie from the White House. Time stopped. The cafe around him blurred, voices faded into meaningless chatter. For a moment it felt as if the world hinged on this single instance. His fingers curled tightly around the phone, disbelief battling excitement within him. Yes, of course, he stammered, trying to maintain a sense of composure. His nerves sang like a taut wire, threatening to snap. As Cassie detailed the meeting arrangements, Jake could feel a surge of energy coursing through him. This was happening, this was real. The weight of inadequacy he often carried began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. When he finally hung up, he was a mix of emotions: thrilled, scared, and overwhelmed. The world around him returned, vibrant and alive. Emma was practically bouncing in her seat, eyes gleaming with excitement. "You just spoke to someone from the White House. I can't believe it," Jake replied, a grin breaking across his face. She said, her enthusiasm infectious. In the hours that followed, Emma became his pillar of support. They settled into a rhythm, brainstorming ideas, developing Jake's pitch into a dynamic narrative that could captivate even the most jaded officials. Emma challenged him, prompting him to delve deeper into his motivations and beliefs. She asked, her voice cutting through the fog of anxiety. As he began to vocalize his ideas, Jake felt a transformation take place. With each rehearsal, he unearthed layers of confidence he didn't know he had. The jacket he had bought only days ago felt like armor as he wore it with pride. Yet as the days flew by and the meeting drew nearer, anxiety crept back in. Doubt whispered in his ear, asking what if he stumbled, what if he embarrassed himself. Each night he lay awake, running scenarios through his mind, replaying lines and rehearsing answers to questions he was sure would come. Emma remained by his side, offering support and humor. "You realize you're overthinking this, right? You've put your heart and soul into this proposal." He replied, the tension in his voice betraying his inner turmoil. "Then you show them," she said, steering his focus back to his vision. "Remember, every great idea starts with someone who believed in it." The tension in the air was palpable, and with every passing moment, the significance of what lay ahead made Jake question everything about himself. But Emma, fierce and unwavering, continued to push him, helping him find clarity within the chaos. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before his bedroom mirror, trying to steady his breath. Reflection staring back at him was a man ready to face destiny, yet doubt still lurked in the corners of his mind. As he walked into the White House, time seemed to fold around him. The grandeur of the building enveloped him, and each step echoed through history. He could feel the weight of his dreams pressing against his chest. This was not just a meeting, it felt like a turning point. Upon arriving at the Oval Office, Jake stood before the president. The atmosphere buzzed with a mix of nerves and purpose. "Mr. Walker," the president greeted, his hand extending with warmth and authority. "Thank you for having me," Jake replied, trying to match the confidence radiating from the man across the room. They settled into their seats, the weight of the moment settling around them. As the meeting began and Jake presented his ideas, something shifted. Each word flowed from him with increasing confidence. He was in control. The initial tremors of fear began to fade into the background, giving way to an authentic passion for what he sought to share. The president leaned in as Jake spoke, showing genuine interest in what he was proposing. There were moments when their eyes met, and Jake felt a connection, as if they were both woven into the fabric of the same dream. "Your insights are impressive, Jake," the president remarked, leaning back slightly, appraising him with an approving gaze. Jake's heart raced, the room around him fading as the weight of those words sank in. For so long, he had doubted his place in the world, but now he felt he was being seen, truly seen. The doubts that had clung to him began to evaporate like morning mist under sunshine, replaced by the fire of belief. As the dialogue continued, Jake countered questions with ease, weaving his narrative into a tapestry of possibilities that danced in the air. The thrill crescendoed within him, fueled by the knowledge that he was not only discussing ideas, he was shaping the future. When the meeting wrapped up, the president leaned forward, looking Jake directly in the eyes. "I see potential in your vision. Let's explore how we can implement this further." Jake left the Oval Office a transformed man, the sunlight hitting his face like a promise. He could hardly contain his beaming smile, an expression of triumph blossoming within him. Emma was waiting outside, practically bouncing with anticipation. "Well," she asked, her eyes gleaming. "It went better than I could have imagined," he said, a wave of relief washing over him. Every fear he'd carried had lifted, replaced by hope and possibility. "Jake," Emma squealed, throwing her arms around him in delight. "You did it." As they walked away from the White House, an undeniable sense of achievement connected them, solidifying the journey they'd taken together. What once began as laughter over an outdated phone had sparked a chain of events that changed Jake's life forever. From that day on, Jake carried a new perspective, allowing himself to embrace moments of uncertainty and confidence alike. He learned that even the most mundane things, like an old phone, could lead to extraordinary opportunities. His path was now illuminated by the belief he had fostered, and he never forgot the laughter that had ignited it all. Each day was a step forward, a chance to embrace new challenges, seize opportunities, and connect with others, not just as a contributor to a greater narrative, but as someone who refined the art of believing in oneself. Emma remained by his side, their laughter echoing in the background, a constant reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected journey begins with a moment of joy and a crack in an old phone. The cafe buzzed with early morning energy, filled with a blend of laughter, clinking cups, and sizzling machines. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the mismatched furniture as Emma leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Across from her sat Jake, nervously tapping away at his phone, an old hunk of plastic that seemed to belong in a museum rather than his pocket. "What's that?" Emma laughed, her voice loud enough to catch the attention of a couple at the next table. "Seriously, Jake." Jake glanced at his phone, the cracked screen displaying a wallpaper from 5 years ago, a photo of him and Emma at a music festival, grinning like idiots. "It works," he said, trying to sound defensive, but the grin on Emma's face made it hard to be serious. "Works," she joked, shaking her head. "What if someone important needs to reach you?" Jake rolled his eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. He knew this old phone was a running joke between them, but it represented more than just a bad choice in technology. It was also a reminder of how far he still felt from his goals. "I'll get a new one soon," he promised, but inside, anxiety twisted like a knot. His upcoming meeting with some big names in his field was weighing heavily on his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that having an outdated phone might somehow affect his chances. "Just make sure they don't see it when they call," Emma winked, leaning closer. But as their laughter faded, the tension returned. Jake was preparing to pitch an idea he had nurtured for months, a proposal he believed could change lives, but doubt crept in like fog drifting over the ocean. What if his words fell flat? What if he stumbled in front of them? Just then, as if the universe had a wicked sense of humor, Jake's phone vibrated violently on the table, startling him out of his thoughts. The screen lit up and he froze. Emma gasped, her laughter dying instantly. She leaned closer, eyes wide in disbelief. Panic surged through Jake. "This can't be real," he muttered, staring at the screen as if it might go away. Yet something deep inside him stirred, a mix of fear and exhilaration. Emma urged, excitement bubbling in her voice. Taking a deep breath, Jake steadied himself. He picked up the phone, his palms sweaty around the device that now felt heavy with significance. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the storm gathering in his chest. "Mister," a calm, collected voice came through, cutting through Jake's panic like a knife. "This is Cassie from the White House." The world around him warped, dimming as reality set in. It felt as if the very air had thickened, shadows dancing in the corners of his vision. This was real, this was happening. Yes, I'd be honored to speak with the president," he managed to blurt out, each word spilling forth like a prayer. Emma's eyes grew even wider, her mouth hanging open in astonishment. She exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake hung up the phone, feeling the disbelief wash over him. He looked up at Emma, who was practically bouncing in her seat. He breathed, still trying to process what had just occurred. "You're like Cinderella, Jake," she said, her excitement piercing through the haze of confusion. The laughter drained from Jake's face, replaced by the weight of impending stress. Emma replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "You've put your heart into this proposal." The days that followed became a whirlwind of activity. Emma transformed into his unofficial coach, guiding him through every aspect of his presentation. They spent hours rehearsing, Emma playing both the president and a variety of skeptical board members, pushing him to think outside the box and anticipate tough questions. "Remember," she said during one session, her voice serious as she leaned across the table, "your vision matters. If you believe in it, others will too." Jake felt those words sink deep into his bones. The more they practiced, the more he began to shed the layers of doubt that had clung to him like damp clothes. He found himself waking up earlier, eager to refine his pitch, to formulate his ideas. With every word he rehearsed, he saw a new future taking shape, one where his voice carried weight. Yet even with Emma's encouragement, self-doubt crept back in, haunting his mind like a familiar ghost. The closer the meeting approached, the more the anxiety swirled. Would he really be able to communicate his ideas? What if they thought he was a fraud? "Just remember," Emma said one evening, grabbing his hands in hers, grounding him as he paced a hole into the floor. "You've worked hard for this. You're not a fraud, you're an innovator." Finally, the day arrived, and Jake stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie repeatedly like a nervous ritual. As he examined himself, he saw not just a man, but a culmination of hopes, fears, and dreams. He felt an odd mix of excitement and terror as he realized this was his moment, his chance to be seen. Walking into the White House felt surreal, the air thick with anticipation. Each step echoed like a drum in his chest as he navigated the corridors adorned with history. His past struggles surfaced momentarily, but determination pushed them aside. He was here to change lives, to speak his truth. When he reached the Oval Office, Jake could hardly breathe. There, behind the iconic resolute desk, sat the president, radiating authority and charisma. "Mr. Walker," he said warmly, extending a hand in greeting. "Welcome." Jake shook the president's hand, feeling the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. "Thank you for having me," he replied, trying to project confidence as he took his seat. The meeting began, the conversation flowing smoothly at first. The president listened intently as Jake laid out his proposal, his voice beginning to hold a steadiness that surprised him. Each idea he shared felt more powerful than the last, manifesting as a tangible vision that stood between them. Midway through his presentation, the president leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "This is an ambitious plan, Jake." Jake seized the moment, drawing from the stories that had inspired his proposal. He painted vivid images of people's lives being transformed, families thriving, communities coming together, futures built on hope. The energy in the room shifted, charged with a sense of possibility. As he spoke, he could see the president nodding along, engaged and intrigued. The tension Jake had carried began to dissipate, replaced by the freedom that came from authenticity. This was his story, his vision, and it mattered. When he wrapped up his presentation, the president smiled, crossing his arms thoughtfully. "You've certainly given us something to consider, Jake." Jake felt a surge of relief, his shoulders loosening as they moved into a deeper discussion about logistics and strategies. Each question felt like a challenge he was ready to face. He could feel the energy of the room shifting, transforming into collaborative potential. After what felt like both an eternity and a blink of an eye, the meeting concluded. The president leaned back in his chair. "I'm impressed, really. Your passion for this project is evident." As Jake left the Oval Office, the sunlight pouring in through the windows felt like a blessing. Gratitude swelled inside him as he stepped back into the world outside. Emma was waiting, a mix of apprehension and hope etched across her face. "Well," she asked, her eyes wide, ready for any news he could share. It went. Jake grinned, a wave of relief washing over him. "Oh my God." Together, they walked away from the White House, each step feeling lighter than the last. In that moment, Jake realized he had crossed a threshold. He'd transformed both his fears and hopes into something profound. What started as a simple joke about his ancient phone had spiraled into a whirlwind of possibilities, challenges, and breakthroughs. More than that, it reaffirmed the truth that often the road less traveled, where laughter and doubt intertwine, can lead to the most extraordinary destinations. As they strolled along, Emma turned to him with a mischievous smile. Jake chuckled, feeling lighter than he had in ages. And what about a new one? Their laughter filled the air, echoing through the bustling streets as they began the next chapter of their lives. Both understood that it wasn't just about the phone or the meeting. It was about the connections they forged, the risks they took, and how laughter could sometimes pave the way to the most unexpected journeys. The coffee shop bustled with energy, sunlight streaming through the large windows, illuminating the faces of people engrossed in conversation. Emma sat across from Jake, the familiar laughter bubbling up between them like a fizzy drink, lighthearted and infectious. But seated at their table was Jake's old phone, a device that seemed determined to hang on for dear life, showing every sign of aging. Emma teased, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Jake rolled his eyes but couldn't fight back a smile. He protested, though the embarrassment began to creep in. It truly was an ancient relic, a clunky piece of technology from a past decade with its cracked screen and faded stickers. But he'd always chosen function over style, until that moment when Emma brought it into the spotlight. Emma leaned in closer, whispering as if revealing a great secret. "What if someone important needs to reach you?" "They'd see that and think you've lost touch with reality," Jake replied, more to himself than to Emma. But as the words left his mouth, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. He had a big meeting coming up, one that could shift the trajectory of his life, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this ancient device would somehow affect how they viewed him. "Maybe I should just send a smoke signal," he joked, attempting to mask his anxiety with humor. He glanced out the window where a group of well-dressed professionals strolled by, their phones glimmering in the sunlight. He felt like he was playing a game he had already lost. Emma, sensing his mood shifting, chuckled lightly. "Well, if your phone rings, I'll be shocked." But just as the laughter faded, the unthinkable happened. The old phone suddenly buzzed, vibrating violently against the varnished wooden table, startling both of them. Jake's heart raced. He looked down and his jaw dropped. "Can't be." Emma's laughter instantly turned into shock, her eyes wide as saucers. "No way." Jake hesitated, staring at the screen, partially in disbelief and partially battling the whirlwind of emotions surging through him. "This must be a mistake," he whispered, but something inside him tugged at his heart, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Emma urged, her excitement palpable. With shaky hands, Jake grabbed the phone, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His voice trembled slightly, revealing the storm of emotions swirling within. "Mr." A calm, confident voice came through, cutting through the haze of Jake's chaotic thoughts. "This is Cassie from the White House." Time froze. Jake's pulse quickened, thoughts colliding as disbelief and excitement danced in his mind. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. No longer just another unknown number, this call had the power to change everything. Yes, of course, he stammered, adrenaline flooding his system. The weight of this moment held him captive. As he hung up, he turned to Emma, who was staring at him with an expression of pure astonishment. "You just talked to someone from the White House," she said slowly, as if trying to grasp the enormity of what had just unfolded. "I can't believe it," Jake breathed, disbelief mingling with exhilaration. Emma practically leaped out of her chair, her spirit infectious. "You just got an invitation to talk to the president." The initial shock quickly transformed into a flurry of activity. They spent the rest of the day brainstorming. Emma became his unofficial coach, guiding him through rehearsals, questioning him as if she were the president herself. With each practice session, Jake's confidence began to rise like a dough left to rise properly, growing fuller and rounder with each passing minute. "Let's break it down," Emma said, her voice steady as they sat at the cafe table surrounded by scribbled notes and coffee cups. Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing. He envisioned how this meeting could impact lives, the communities it could strengthen. He laid out his proposal, each idea sparking a fervor within him that he hadn't felt in years. And as the days passed, his practice sessions grew longer, charged with excitement. Emma pushed him to dig deeper. She asked gently, prompting him to visualize how this conversation could ripple beyond the walls of that Oval Office. But even as his confidence climbed, that persistent inner voice of doubt crept in. Each night, turning off the light, thoughts spiraled around in his mind. The anxiety tightened its grip, sabotaging all the belief he had built up during the day. What if he froze? What if they dismissed his ideas? What if they laughed? At one point, Emma caught him pacing back and forth. "The only person who's going to laugh is you once you realize how capable you are," she said, gently pushing him back into focus. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before the mirror, his mind racing. He adjusted his tie and took a moment to breathe. "You got this," he whispered to himself, trying to drown out the jumble of nerves. Walking through the impressive halls of the White House, he could feel history wrapping around him, the weight of every decision made within those walls pushing against his chest. He was no longer the person feeling small behind an ancient phone. He was here to share his vision, and that was monumental. When he entered the Oval Office, the aura was both intimidating and exhilarating. The president sat behind the iconic resolute desk, exuding a sense of authority that swallowed the air around them. "Mr. Walker," the president greeted, extending his hand. "Thank you for having me," Jake said, trying to maintain his composure as he took his seat. The enormity began to hit him, but he pushed through. This was about more than himself, it was about making a difference. As he began to lay out his proposal, the words flowed more easily than he had anticipated. He spoke with conviction, pouring his heart into the ideas he had shaped. Dialogue unfolded naturally, and Jake could sense a genuine interest sparking in the president's eyes. "Your vision is engaging, Jake," the president said, leaning in slightly. Jake felt a rush of energy surge through him, revitalizing his spirit. The moment felt electric, and he leaned into the question, unraveling his ideas with passion. As he spoke, he presented data, statistics, and heartwarming stories of the people his proposal would benefit. He wanted them to see the impact. The president nodded, genuinely engrossed. With each passing moment, Jake began to shed the last remnants of self-doubt, allowing his passion to shine through. He felt like he was in a dance, exchanging ideas and growing together in understanding. When the meeting wrapped up, the air was charged with excitement. "Thank you for sharing your vision," the president said, smiling. Jake walked out of the Oval Office feeling like a new man. The sunlight hit him like a wave of warmth, and he breathed in deeply, relief washing over him. This was it. He had seized the moment. Outside, Emma was waiting, her face lit up with anticipation. "So, it went incredibly well," Jake said, hardly able to contain his excitement. Emma jumped up and down, a radiant smile stretching across her face. "That's amazing, Jake." As they strolled away from the White House, Jake understood that this wasn't just about him. It was about everything that had led him here, the laughter, the fears, the late-night rehearsals, and the unwavering support of a friend who refused to let him doubt himself. Jake laughed, the sound rich and carefree. They continued walking, their laughter ringing out, mixed with the vibrant sounds of the city around them. As they shared their dreams for the future, Jake felt the warmth of hope envelop him. This was just the beginning, a new chapter forged in spontaneity and courage. Sometimes it takes a moment of laughter over something trivial to awaken something profound. Every message and every call is a part of a larger story, a story of perseverance, friendship, and transforming fear into opportunity. Jake walked into a future glowing with potential, reminding himself to always keep dreaming big, because you never know when your outdated phone might just ring with a presidential contact. The bright lights of the cafe flickered as Emma settled into a booth, her laughter ringing through the air with the brightness of a bell. Directly across from her sat Jake, his fingers nervously grazing the cracked screen of his old phone, which sat on the table like a relic from a bygone age. Emma exclaimed, her eyes wide with mock disbelief as she pointed at the device. "Is that your great-grandfather's phone? Seriously?" Jake chuckled, trying to deflect her teasing. "It works just fine," he replied, but embarrassment crept in with every word. This ancient piece of technology was more than a phone. It was a reminder of how he felt stuck in life unmoving while everyone else was racing ahead. She challenged, shaking her head. He scoffed, but inside, his pulse quickened at the thought of an important call. He did have a big meeting coming up, one that could shift the trajectory of his career, and for the first time, he felt the weight of that phone pressing down on him. Emma leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Just imagine if the president's people called you. Yeah, right, Jake retorted, rolling his eyes but feeling the need to defend himself. The president wouldn't even notice me, he muttered, though a flicker of hope sparked within him. Just then, the moment shifted. The old phone vibrated violently on the table, the screen lighting up as if it were alive. Jake's heart raced. He glanced down and felt a rush of disbelief as the words "the president" flashed across the screen. Emma gasped, her laughter dying instantly. No way, Jake whispered, looking at her like she had just conjured magic. She urged, her eyes wide and encouraging. His hands trembled, adrenaline surging through him. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed the phone. The word came out shaky, caught somewhere between disbelief and panic. "Mr." The voice on the line was smooth, filled with authority. "This is Cassie from the White House." Time seemed to stop. Jake's heart raced as the weight of those words crashed over him like a wave. His mind raced with the possibilities. This moment could change everything. Yes, I'd love to speak with the president," he finally managed to respond, his voice steadying as if each word brought him back into focus. Emma's eyes widened, her mouth forming an O of astonishment. She exclaimed, her excitement palpable, "I can't believe it." He stammered, glancing from the phone to Emma, trying to grasp the enormity of the moment. "You are going to talk to the president," she squealed, bouncing in her seat. Suddenly, the anxiety that had gripped him for weeks morphed into adrenaline. They spent the rest of the day brainstorming, Emma taking on the role of his coach. She pushed him to clarify his ideas, transforming vague thoughts into specific plans. "Tell me exactly what you want to achieve," she said, her voice firm yet encouraging. Jake closed his eyes, envisioning the future he fought for, the communities he wanted to empower, the lives he wanted to change. Slowly, he articulated those visions, and with each practice session, he began to find his voice. But the closer the meeting got, the more his nerves twisted. Each night, the self-doubt returned, creeping like a shadow. What if they didn't take him seriously? What if he stumbled over his words? "Stop, you've prepared for this," Emma reminded him, pulling him back from his thoughts. "You deserve this opportunity." Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie, taking in his reflection. Frustration bubbled at the edges of excitement as he reminded himself of the journey that had led him here. With every brush of his hands, he banished the doubts clinging to him like cobwebs. Stepping into the White House felt surreal. The walls seemed to breathe with history, each corner whispering secrets of the past. The grandeur was overwhelming, yet it only fueled his determination. This was his moment. When he entered the Oval Office, everything around him shimmered with significance. The presidential seal on the floor, the rich colors of the room, and the air thick with expectation. The president sat behind the iconic resolute desk, exuding authority and charisma. "Mr. Walker," he greeted, extending a hand. "Thank you for having me," Jake replied, trying to sound confident as he took his seat. As Jake began to lay out his proposal, the words flowed, more natural than he anticipated. With every pitch, he channeled his passion, weaving a narrative of hope and community resilience. The president listened intently, nodding along as Jake elaborated on the potential impacts of his ideas. The president asked, leaning forward, intrigued. Jake felt the adrenaline spike again, but this time it was invigorating. He seized the moment, diving into details and sharing stories that tugged at heartstrings. The more he spoke, the more he believed in the change he could inspire. He had lived in doubt for too long, but here, in this moment, he was a beacon of clarity. The dialogue shifted from a formal meeting to a collaborative brainstorm. Together, they bounced ideas back and forth, building on Jake's vision until it felt tangible and alive. He could sense the energy in the room, budding like spring life after a long winter. When the meeting wrapped up, the president rested his hand on the desk, his gaze steady. "I'm impressed, Jake." Jake walked out of the Oval Office, the pressure of the world lifting as realization washed over him. He had not only shared his vision, but also sparked a conversation about change. As he stepped outside, the sunlight beamed down, feeling like a reward after a long fight. Emma stood waiting, her face lit up with anticipation. "So, it went better than I could have imagined," Jake said, a grin breaking across his face like dawn breaking over a horizon. Emma jumped, clapping her hands. "That's amazing." They strolled away from the White House, each step fueled by a sense of triumph. The sun felt warmer, the world a little brighter. No longer was Jake the guy tethered to an outdated phone. He had stepped into a realm of possibilities, and Emma walked beside him, a steadfast ally. She asked, beaming. Jake pondered, letting the question linger. I think it's about building on this momentum." With every word, he felt the weight of his journey lift. No longer shrouded in self-doubt, he emerged ready to embrace what lay ahead. As they wandered through the city streets, their laughter filled the air like music. The sound echoed off the buildings, merging with the rhythm of everyday life. Every moment felt significant, charged with potential. Emma turned to him, grinning. Jake laughed, shaking his head. She teased, nudging him playfully. Together, they imagined the possibilities that lay ahead, each dream unfurling like a new leaf in spring. It was only the beginning of a journey that would change their lives, and perhaps even the lives of others. The realization washed over them like a gentle tide, a deeper truth about stepping beyond the boundaries set by fear. Sometimes it takes an old relic, a moment of laughter, and the courage to believe in yourself for the extraordinary to happen. As Jake walked beside Emma, he felt renewed, ready to face the future head-on. He would no longer be just a guy with an outdated phone. He was now a man of ambition, armed with the understanding that dreams are only ever a call away. The cafe buzzed with the usual morning energy, bright laughter floating over the sounds of clinking dishes and steaming coffee. At a small corner table, Emma leaned back, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Across from her, Jake nervously fiddled with his phone, an ancient device that was practically begging for retirement. Emma asked, pretending to sound appalled. A relic from the past, Jake chuckled, but a hint of embarrassment crept into his cheeks. Hey, it works just fine. I don't need the latest model. She raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. Everything, like sending texts from the Stone Age. Jake rolled his eyes, attempting to brush off her teasing. But deep down, anxiety twisted in his stomach. He had a meeting coming up, a significant one that could alter the course of his career. What if they saw his worn-out phone and dismissed him as just another underachiever? Maybe a smoke signal would be more effective, he retorted, attempting to deflect the tension. Suddenly, chaos erupted right in front of him. The ancient phone began to buzz furiously on the table, vibrating with a life of its own. Emma exclaimed, her laughter vanishing as her eyes widened in shock. No way, Jake felt frozen, part of him unsure this was even real. How could this old device have a name like that pop up on the screen? He whispered, the weight of disbelief crashing into him. Emma urged, practically bouncing in her seat, disbelief mixed with excitement. Swallowing hard, Jake grabbed the phone, hands trembling. He managed to stutter, trying to steady himself. The voice on the other end was calm, authoritative, yet reassuring. This is Cassie from the White House. Time stood still. The room around him faded, and every sound became muffled. His heart raced as waves of panic and exhilaration collided within him. This moment had the power to change everything. Yes, I'd be thrilled to speak with the president, he blurted out, trying to sound calmer than he felt. When he hung up, he turned to Emma, who was staring at him wide-eyed. You just talked to someone from the White House. His mind spun as he grappled with the reality of the situation. Jake, she exclaimed, her excitement palpable. In a whirlwind of adrenaline, they spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming. Emma transformed into his unofficial coach, forcing him to clarify his thoughts and boil down his sprawling ideas into a concise narrative that could captivate even the most jaded public servants. Tell me exactly what you want to achieve in this meeting, she prompted, her voice both firm and encouraging. He closed his eyes, envisioning the future he was fighting for, the communities he wanted to help, the realities he longed to change. Sensing her unwavering support, he began to articulate his vision, explaining how collaboration could empower marginalized groups and spark real change. Every time he practiced, Jake felt more anchored, yet waves of doubt continued to surge. He lay awake at night, replaying scenarios in his mind. What if he stumbled? What if they laughed him out of the room? Stop. Stop, Jake, you've prepared for this, Emma said during one of their late-night sessions. You deserve this opportunity. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before the mirror in his apartment, adjusting his tie repeatedly, the reflection staring back at him filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. This was it. When he stepped into the White House, the grandeur enveloped him like a warm blanket. The weight of responsibility pressed against his shoulders, but determination surged through him. As he moved further inside, the walls seemed to breathe history, reminders of decisions that had changed the world. Upon reaching the Oval Office, time felt elastic. The president, seated behind the resolute desk, greeted him with a firm handshake. Mr. Walker, welcome. Thank you for having me, Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. As he began to present his proposal, something shifted. With each word, he ignited the passion within him, speaking candidly about the issues he wanted to address. The president leaned in, showing a genuine interest that made Jake's heart race even faster. Tell me more about how you see this impacting the community, the president asked, his eyes locked on Jake with an intensity that both intimidated and inspired him. Jake seized the opportunity, detailing not just statistics but stories that painted vivid pictures of struggle and resilience. He had lived in that world, felt its pain and potential, and now he was determined to share it. At the core of this proposal, it's about connection, he explained. The president nodded, intrigued. The vibe in the room shifted. It began to feel like a conversation rather than an interview. Jake felt a warmth growing inside him, rooted in the realization that he wasn't just pitching an idea, he was sharing a vision for a better future. As the dialogue deepened, the president and Jake began to exchange ideas, brainstorming together. There was an electric current in the air. Questions turned into strategies, and what had once felt abstract began to crystallize into real possibilities. When the meeting wrapped up, a weight lifted off Jake's shoulders. The president leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "I'm impressed, Jake." Jake stepped out of the Oval Office, the sun spilling through the windows, flooding his mind with a sense of clarity that had eluded him for so long. He felt invigorated, ready to tackle whatever came next. Emma was waiting outside, her face aglow with anticipation. She asked eagerly. "It went better than I ever imagined," he said, a broad grin breaking free. The joy bubbled up inside him like champagne popping out of the bottle. "Of course," Emma squealed, jumping up and down with excitement. They walked away from the White House, each step feeling lighter than the last. In that moment, Jake realized he had not just left a meeting. He had left behind doubt, fear, and all the limits he had once imposed on himself. Emma asked, her enthusiasm infectious. "I want to begin engaging with the community, get to know them, truly understand their needs," Jake replied, the vision forming in his mind. They strolled through the bustling streets, their laughter mingling with the hum of the city. With every word, the enormity of what lay ahead sank in. From a humor-filled conversation about a phone to discussing real change, it was a journey he knew he would carry with him forever. As they walked, Emma turned to him, an expression of cathartic joy washing over her. Jake laughed, nodding in agreement. They shared a moment of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the unpredictability of life. Often it's the small things that lead to great changes: an old phone, a well-placed joke, and the courage to step forward even when you have doubts. With each passing moment, it became clear that they were both on the cusp of something transformative. They had not just crossed a threshold, they had set a series of events in motion that could inspire others. As they turned the corner, a gust of wind caught Jake's hair, whipping it back as if trying to carry him into the future. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold. Emma said, her voice filled with hope. "Absolutely," Jake replied, filled with a sense of purpose. And who knows, as they walked farther into the vibrant energy of the evening, Jake knew this was just the beginning. He had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, ready to embrace every opportunity. One unexpected phone call had changed everything, and he was prepared to make the most of it. Sometimes all it takes is one laugh, one moment of courage, and a small connection to spark a journey that could shift the world. Jake smiled at Emma, filled with gratitude for friendships, for laughter, and for a future that now looked dazzlingly bright. The cafe buzzed with life, sunlight filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Emma sat across from Jake, her laughter ringing out like a bell. But Jake wasn't laughing. Instead, he was nervously tapping on his phone, a tired-looking relic that had seen better days. "What is that?" Emma teased, leaning in closer, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Seriously, it looks like it could crumble into dust at any moment." Jake chuckled but felt his face get warm. He protested, trying to keep his cool, but deep down he knew she might be right. This outdated device weighed heavily on his mind, especially with an important meeting looming ahead. "What if someone important needs to reach you?" She shot back, her playful tone masking the concern she felt for him. He rolled his eyes, feeling the anxiety twist in his gut. He shot back, dismissing her comments, but the truth was that he was terrified the phone would fail him right when he needed it most. Emma leaned in, lowering her voice slightly as if sharing a secret. "Wouldn't it be funny if the president's people called?" "Yeah, right," Jake replied, shaking his head, though a hint of hope flickered inside him. Still, he brushed off the thought. The president, really? That was a ridiculous notion. Just as he was about to change the subject, the unexpected happened. The phone began to vibrate violently against the table, startling both of them. A name flashed brightly across the screen, and Jake felt his heart stop. Emma's laughter vanished, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. "No." Jake felt a wave of disbelief wash over him, his voice caught in his throat. "This can't be real," he whispered, staring at the screen in shock. Emma urged, her excitement palpable, her eyes practically sparkling with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, Jake grabbed the phone, adrenaline surging through him. He managed, the word coming out shaky despite his attempts to sound calm. "Mr." The voice on the other end was steady, confident, cutting through his panic like a knife. "This is Cassie from the White House." Time froze. Everything around him faded, the laughter and chatter of the cafe blending into a distant hum. The weight of this moment pressed down on him, both exhilarating and terrifying. Yes, I'd love to speak with the president," he stammered, feeling the urgency of the moment and the responsibility that came with it. Emma stared at him, her mouth agape, disbelief morphing into excitement. She whispered, "I can't believe it." Jake breathed, a swirl of emotions flooding his mind. Emma practically leaped from her seat, a burst of energy radiating from her. "You are about to meet the president." The room around him seemed to vibrate with possibilities. They spent the rest of the day brainstorming, Emma transforming into an energetic coach, guiding him through every aspect of his presentation. "Tell me exactly what you want to achieve in this meeting," Emma prompted, her voice steady, grounding him in the moment. Jake closed his eyes for a second and envisioned everything that mattered to him. The changes he wanted to inspire, the voice he wanted to give those who felt unheard. The passion ignited something deep within, and he began articulating his vision with growing confidence. But with each rehearsal, self-doubt crept back in, a shadow lurking in the corners of his mind. What if he stumbled? What if they laughed at him? As the meeting day approached, his anxiety spiraled. Each night, thoughts raced through his mind. Would they see him as credible? The weight of uncertainty clung to him like a damp blanket. "Stop worrying about what they'll think of you," Emma said one night, her voice cutting through his frantic thoughts. "This is about your vision." Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jake stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie, trying to steady his breath. Today was a pivotal moment in his life, and he needed to be ready. As he walked through the halls of the White House, he felt the gravity of history around him. The walls bore witness to countless decisions that had shifted national tides. Could his ideas really matter that much? When he stepped into the Oval Office, the weight of anticipation hung around him like a storm cloud. The president sat behind the iconic resolute desk, exuding authority mixed with a welcoming demeanor. "Mr. Walker," he said, extending a hand. "Welcome. Thank you for having me," Jake replied, forcing himself to maintain eye contact, willing his nerves to settle. As Jake began to lay out his proposal, words poured out. He spoke of dreams and change, of communities revitalized through collaboration and inclusion. The president's eyes showed genuine interest, which energized Jake even further. The president asked, his tone serious yet engaging. Jake felt the rush, the adrenaline fueling him. "It's about empowerment," he exclaimed, using his hands to illustrate his points. "We need to listen to the community and involve them in shaping their own futures." The president nodded, leaning forward, clearly invested in the conversation. This dialogue felt different. It was no longer a pitch, but a collaboration. As they moved deeper into discussion, ideas flew back and forth like sparks, igniting a fire of innovation. This was becoming more than just a meeting. It was a shared mission to inspire hope and action. But then came the moment that shifted everything. The president leaned back, a thoughtful expression crossing his features. "Jake, your passion is evident, but let's talk logistics." In that instant, doubt jostled for dominance in Jake's mind. Was he ready for this? He shifted in his seat, feeling the pressure of expectation rising around him. He didn't have everything figured out, and the thought of stumbling sent a knot twisting in his stomach. Yes, I think so," he replied, his voice faltering slightly. I have ideas on how we can start small and scale up, ensuring community involvement from day one." The president's gaze remained steady, his patience unnerving. "But I need to know how to build trust with the community. I worry that without that foundation, nothing else will matter," Jake admitted, feeling vulnerable, yet relieved to speak his truth. A silence hung in the air, a breath caught in time, before the president broke it with a subtle smile. "Trust is everything, you're right to prioritize it." Jake felt his heart lift. Perhaps he was on the right path after all. They delved deeper into strategies, discussing how Jake could partner with local leaders, engage with citizens, and create spaces for dialogue and understanding. Ideas intertwined as they built a vision together, a tapestry woven with intention and purpose. The meeting wrapped up with a palpable sense of momentum. The president leaned back in his chair, exuding warmth. "Thank you, Jake. You've given me a lot to think about. I can see your vision aligning with our goals, and I want to explore this further." Jake left the Oval Office, exhilarated and nervous. The sunlight hit him as he exited, a golden embrace flooding him with energy. He had shared his ideas and they resonated. He could hardly believe the shift that had just taken place. As he stepped outside, Emma was waiting, her excitement palpable. She shouted, rushing toward him. "It went better than I dreamed," Jake said, feeling elation bubble up within him. Emma squealed. "I want to get involved with the community right away," he said, his mind racing with possibilities. They walked away from the White House, each step feeling buoyant, charged with hope. Jake couldn't shake the thrill coursing through his veins. He felt reborn, like the weight of self-doubt had been lifted entirely. But just as they turned the corner, Jake's phone buzzed violently in his pocket, pulling him back to reality. Fumbling for it, he opened it to see yet another unfamiliar number calling. He wondered aloud. "Answer it," Emma urged, her eyes wide with curiosity. Jake hesitated, uncertainty washing over him. The exhilarating moment from just moments ago faded into a backdrop of anxiety. Maybe it was someone important, or maybe it was just a wrong number. He glanced at Emma, who was almost bouncing on her toes. Silence stretched out on the other end, an unsettling void filled with anticipation. Sweat started to beat on Jake's forehead as seconds ticked by. Then the voice spoke urgent, strained. "Mr. Walker, you need to listen to me carefully." Jake felt the weight of the world crashing in on him. This was no ordinary call. It was the kind that could change everything. He asked, blood pounding in his ears, heart racing as the reality of what was unfolding began to sink in. "Just listen to me and don't panic. I can't explain everything right now, but your proposal is at risk." The words hung heavily in the air, a looming storm of uncertainty closing in. With adrenaline surging and every instinct screaming, Jake realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much darker story.